Chuckalinic. I'm a reenactor. And for 36 years, I used to use everything I learned in reenactment to bring history to life for my students. And that involved wearing the garb and, bringing in stuff for them to handle. And my kids got more of a feel for the way history worked. I'm not in the classroom anymore, though. So that means my time is my own. And I have to justify having a whole bunch of garb from different time periods. I've also got to try to channel my passion for bringing the past to life. And so I've been involved in really digging into California history because it was an area that interested me, but I couldn't teach it because of the limitations of my curriculum. So I started with the missions. I covered all the missions and the assistencias and the presidios, and then I moved on to New Russian, California, and then I stumbled across a reference to outlaws hanging out in saloons that were inside missions, and that kind of blew my mind. And even though I'd heard that the missions were secularized, just the idea that there were saloons inside these mission buildings. I also found out there were jails too. But the idea that here are these outlaws hanging out. Then I started wondering, hey, did these guys ever meet? Well, in researching, I ended up discovering that a number of them were related. And you hear about the James brothers and the Daltons. And like, okay, they're relatives. But then I didn't realize that some of these guys also ended up in other gangs. And so this led to my new project, which the long title is Chasing Bandidos and Lawmen, but the short title works better for me, Chasing Bandidos. So what I'm doing now is I'm currently on the trail again for a guy named Procopio. And he happens to be, at least supposedly, a nephew of the most infamous California bandido, Joaquín Murrieta. So, since I had too much stuff for one video, I'm back, chasing him down. And I hope you stick with me on my journey. So, after the whole Rains incident around Rancho Cucamonga and having charges dropped against him due to lack of evidence, Procopio decided it would be a better idea to get out of the area. And so he next appears in Alameda County, and he gets involved with a gang there, and soon he takes over the gang. And a couple of his associates end up being kind of famous or infamous. Narcisco Bojorquez and Chano Ortega. And this gang is going to get involved in nocturnal activities. Actually, they're raiding farmhouses and ranchos by night. And in one particular case, a farmer named Aaron Golding or Golden, his wife, and both of their children were killed. And there was a Mexican farm worker who worked on that particular farm or ranch, and he told the authorities that he had witnessed Procopio and his gang. Well, he wasn't believed, and what ended up taking place was vigilante justice. They decided that this witness must have somehow been involved with the crime. So he gets hanged. Procopio and his two gang members, they get arrested, but there's no evidence. The only witness has been hung. In 1863, Procopio and his teammate Narciso Bohorquez, they're stealing a bunch of cattle from a rancher named Pope. And this is in the San Leandro area. And what ends up happening is at one point, Procopio's going to basically draw the attention. And Constable O.B. Wood from San Leandro heads out, and he's got a suspicion. He finds this local butcher that pretty much everyone knew he was a fence. And what ended up happening is he caught Procopio in the act of selling the cattle and receiving the money. And these are clearly, Pope's cattle. Well, what Procopio does is, this is a very typical trick for him, is he claimed he was unarmed. And, that he would submit and go quietly. And what he did is he started shooting, and he wounded Constable Wood in the arm. And this has riled up a big crowd, and they're armed, and they chase him down, and he ends up jumping off a bridge into the water, swims like 50 or 60 yards, the pistol's between his teeth. I still don't know how you can do that trick and not swallow a bunch of water or breathe it in. And he gets to the other side, and the crowd is still chasing him, and they chase him into a marsh, and a gunfight ensues. And then finally, when he's out of ammunition, he submits, and he's taken into custody, and he doesn't deny his guilt at all. But what he does, he basically takes all the blame so that Bohorquez doesn't end up getting arrested. There's that whole thing about snitches, I suppose. And what ends up happening is Procopio will be sentenced to 9 years in San Quentin. Now, as far as Bohorquez, he ends up drawing the attention of an Alameda lawman named Harry Morse. And Morse he's already shown up in one of the videos where I was talking about Tiburcio Vásquez. He basically has a checklist of people that he is going after. And he will be going after Procopio. He did go after Vásquez, and even though he didn't personally arrest him, he managed to tip off the Los Angeles sheriff about where to get him. And one of the things he does, he finds Bohorquez, and Bohorquez doesn't go quietly. So his story is done. In March of 1871, Procopio gets out from behind the wall at San Quentin. And the way the Alameda Gazette put it, he returned to his old habits like a dog to vomit, which is like a really tasteful image. But he has decided to go back to crime, and he returns to the Livermore Valley. And he is staying with a guy named Juan Camargo. And, well, some cattle in the area that belonged to Mr. Arnett turn up stolen. And one of the heads of the stolen cattle, I would imagine actually the whole animal, is in Camargo's yard. And a mob shows up, and they grab Camargo, and they take him out into the woods, and about 3 miles into the woods, and they throw a rope over a tree, and they put the rope around his neck, and they basically yank him up and down until he kind of gets the idea, Camargo needs to point at somebody. So he names Procopio and another guy. After the Camargo affair, Procopio decides that leaving the area would probably be a good plan. And what he does is he ends up going down to Monterey, and there he meets Tiburcio Vásquez. Tiburcio Vásquez has been active since the early 50s, and you have to understand, this is like 1871. This is his home in Monterey. Actually, it was his family's home. It was originally a one-story adobe. Okay, here's what Vásquez brings to the table. 20 years of experience in breaking the law. He's got wisdom. He's learned to be patient. Then there's Procopio, who is full of a lot of energy and enthusiasm, and he's also pretty arrogant. And what's going to happen is Vásquez is going to start mentoring Procopio, because he's trying to contain all this energy and keep him from going off the rails. And what he ends up doing is he forms a new gang, and he's going to basically build it around this duo. And members of this gang included Juan Soto, who's called a human wildcat. And basically it's a whole bunch of meanness stuffed into a 6-foot tall, 200-pound frame. Then there's Abdon Leyva, and he's in the gang partially because he's got a convenient place to hide out in, and also Vásquez is seducing Leyva's wife. But there's like a number of people, and they are pulling off stagecoach robberies left and right. They're doing in Salinas, they're doing this in Visalia, and they are, when seen in various places, they are absolutely resplendent. They look fantastic. They're all sporting gold watches, which were probably ones taken from one of the Visalia stage holdups. So that year in 1871, when Procopio is running around as part of Vásquez's gang, terrorizing Monterey County and other places, Procopio makes himself so despised by pretty much everybody in Monterey County. He's arrogant, he is rude, he can't keep his mouth shut. He's got quite an ego as far as he's always talking about his accomplishments and his deeds. Well, towards the end of the year, Vásquez and Procopio, they will take off. They'll go to Mexico. They'll hang out in one of the rural areas for a nice debauched stay. Then they're going to take a steamship and they're going to come back up to San Francisco. Vásquez's gang is starting to fall apart. At one point, Vásquez and Procopio decide to leave this one hangout of theirs, and Juan Soto, the human wildcat, a really brutal guy, he decides he's going to stay. Well, Sheriff Morse from Alameda County shows up there and missed getting Vásquez and Procopio by one day, and ends up in a gunfight with Soto, and the human wildcat goes down shooting. Well, now Vásquez and Procopio, they're in San Francisco, and Vásquez is deciding, I really am not feeling it. And he heads for the hills. And Procopio decides to stay. He either had a girl in the city or he was having himself a good time in the brothels. And what ends up happening is he's noticed. And the sheriff from San Francisco and Sheriff Morse show up, and they begin tracking him. And in February of 1872, they see him in, it's described as either a house or a brothel or a fandango hall. Whatever the place is, they know that Procopio's in there. So Morse is going to go through the back door. The other law enforcement officials, they're going through the front. As they come through the front, Procopio starts to stand and to draw a weapon. Morse catches him from behind. With one hand, grabs him by the throat. With the other hand, holds up a revolver and says, "You're my man." Okay. Procopio surrenders meekly. He was initially arrested for involvement in the murder of a Frenchman over in Pleasanton, but there's not enough evidence. So what they do is they end up getting him on cattle theft. And so he makes a return to San Quentin. This is the old city jail for the city of Monterey, and it'll kind of have to stand in for San Jose. What will end up happening is while Procopio is locked up at San Quentin, Tiburcio Vásquez is caught, and he is going to be sentenced to death, and his longtime nemesis will get to pull the lever, and Tiburcio Vásquez's last words, "Pronto." In June of 1877, Procopio was paroled. Shortly after that, he formed a new gang, and what he ended up doing was he came to Caliente, where I am right now. Right now, it's basically a post office and a few residents. In that time period, there were about 3,000 people living here. It was a boom town because of railroad construction, because this had been the terminus for the Southern Pacific Railway. And so lots of people here, lots of money floating around. And what Procopio ended up doing is, just like his mentor, he came into this town and he enacted an enforced levy or tribute. And that was for the businesses and individuals in the town, which probably meant a lot of money. In November, he ended up raiding Grangeville, went to a store owner, held a knife at the store owner's gut, and said, "Do you not know me? I am Procopio, the red-handed dick. You will open the safe for me." And he and his gang got away to as far as the Tejon Pass, where Procopio and his 5 gang members were caught. They were arrested. Procopio escaped. The other 5 were lynched. So now he's going to turn around. He's going to form a new gang. And by the end of December, he robs another place in Hanford and takes off. Well, now a posse gets formed, and one of the posse members is going to be a harness maker, a Civil War veteran named Solomon Gladden. Loaded down with supplies and clothing, Procopio's horse drowned. Apparently not all that far from Arroyo de Cantua, where his uncle Joaquín Murrieta was killed. And he was found by a posse while he was walking, carrying his saddle. And he'd asked a question in Spanish of where this one California community was. And when someone questioned him, he basically disappeared into the fog. Well, there was a tip later on that he was hanging out in this one cabin. And when the posse tracked him down, they burst into the cabin and Apparently he was asleep, or at least he looked like he was asleep. They woke him up and he said, "Hey, can I dress myself?" And while he was doing so, he pulled out 2 pistols and he shot the posse member, Saul Gladden, dead. And Gladden was supposed to have been married the next week. So now the search is really going to intensify. And the manhunt is going nuts. And at one point, a deputy, Ellis, runs into Procopio, questions him, tells him to put up his hands. Procopio's response is to start shooting. I guess he shot one of Ellis's fingers. And from that point, Procopio actually disappears from history. So when I say Procopio disappears from history, what I mean is there's no real documentation as to what happens. There's only stories. A lot of those stories involve him going to Mexico. One involves him going to Arizona and he's arrested in Tucson. As far as the Mexico stories, they go in different directions. He went to Mexico and he lived a quiet life, which I'm not quite buying, given his ego. He went to Mexico and he joined the Mexican army. I'm not quite buying that one because he never seemed very disciplined. And that would, to me, that would seem boring for him. He went to Mexico and he shot an actor in a brothel and was executed by a firing squad. He went to Mexico and was running his mouth in some saloon, and a bunch of people basically shot him to pieces. You get to pick which ending seems appropriate. Well, that's it for the story of Procopio. And I'm going to go move on to chasing somebody else down. I hope you stick with me.